Good afternoon. I'm Julie Decker, President and CEO of the FSU Alumni Association, and I'm so delighted to welcome you back to the 6th episode of our Webinar Wednesday series. Throughout these series, we have brought you experts from faculty, staff, and alumni to your homes to provide you practical and relevant information, and hopefully they've informed you and help you navigate the times in which we find ourselves. Many of you tuning in today are members of the Alumni Association, and I thank you for your commitment to our organization. I would also like to thank our corporate partners for their generous support, which makes programs like our Webinar Wednesday series possible. Thank you. I have the great pleasure of introducing our presenter, art therapist Nicole Rainey. Nicole is the founder of Mosaic Creative Counseling. Her experience includes working with diverse populations recovering from trauma history, relational and family issues, grief, loss, foster care, and adoption concerns. Prior to private practice, her work specifically focused on survivors of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, violence, and sex trafficking or prostitution. Nicole has training in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, adoption competency, as well as working with survivors of sexual exploitation. As a registered art therapist, she strives to make clients feel safe and comfortable expressing themselves and problem solving through talk, imagery, or creativity. Nicole helps to empower clients to identify their goals while guiding them on their journey towards progress. After years of experience providing therapy to children, teens, and adults from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and life experience, she started Mosaic Creative Counseling as a way to unite the community. Today, Nicole will discuss how you can use art in the home to cope with stress. She will present 4 art directives for how to use art in the home for individual, families with young children, or families with older children, and how you can use art to connect with your community. Nicole, welcome.
Thank you, Julie. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for everyone who's watching today. Like Julie mentioned, I'm an art therapist, a licensed mental health. So for anybody who's asking, like, what is art therapy? Art therapy is a mental health profession. We use art making and creativity combined with psychological theories and psychological practices to help clients meet their mental health goals. So we work with families, individuals, couples, to focus on creativity to accomplish mental health progress. To engage in art therapy, you don't have to have any art skills, you don't have to be creative, you don't have to have any artistic ability to engage in art therapy. We focus more on the process of creativity and the process of self-expression rather than creating like a beautiful end product. So art therapy is facilitated by professionals. We, as art therapists, we get an educational background, including like a master's degree and some credentials after that as well. So I'm sure we're all in this quarantine lifestyle together right now. We've been dealing with social distancing and social isolation a little bit, wearing masks and dealing with our own anxiety. So everybody take a deep breath with me, and hopefully this webinar will help you guys come up with some creativity in your home, some ways to use art as a way to relieve stress in what we're going through and dealing with this pandemic. So why would we do art during a quarantine? Well, I've got a lot of good examples and a lot of good research backing why art actually reduces stress for us. So art during quarantine is kind of the perfect activity for families, individuals, couples. Art relieves stress. It encourages playfulness and creativity for kids and adults alike. It can serve as a distraction. I know we're really concerned with how do we make all these Zoom meetings? How do we manage watching our kids full time until the daycares open back up? So art is a way to encourage mindfulness, encourage focus in the present moment instead of focusing on what we have this coming afternoon or what call we have to be on. Art can encourage self-esteem for kids and teens and even young adults. It encourages us to create something from nothing. So that can oftentimes boost our self-esteem and make us feel like we have certain skills, we are able to problem solve. Another really great benefit of us engaging in art during this time is it reduces screen fatigue. I know we're all talking about that a lot. How do we help our eyes? How do we kind of calm down from all these Zoom meetings? So it encourages tactile stimulation instead of looking at a screen all day and being overstimulated by those external sources. Art can also allow us an outlet. It allows us to vent, to express things. During this time of quarantine, a lot of things we don't really have the words for. We're in a time unprecedented that really hasn't happened to a lot of people in our generation, and it's hard to really communicate what we're feeling. And so art offers an avenue for us to express that and explore that without having to name it, without having to really focus on the verbal vocabulary. And one of the big things that art offers is there's a lot of research behind art's effects on our central nervous system. So if you guys aren't aware, the nervous system is what causes anxiety in our bodies. It's what causes and increases that stress response for us. So because art calms our nervous system, when we're engaging in it, it actually reduces our anxiety and lowers our stress levels. So that's why it's so important to try and come up with some creativity during this time, try and engage in some art. So like Julie said, I have 4 different art activities for you guys. Hopefully they're really practical. I tried to create some activities that have minimal supplies, so you can hopefully just use whatever you have at home. You don't have to go out and buy a whole lot. These activities are for individuals, for families with young kids and families with old kids. And then I do have one activity in here that's how to reconnect with our community during this time of social isolation. So hopefully these will be really practical for you guys. This first art directive that I do want to talk about, it works really well for individuals. So I'm going to show you guys a little bit of what this directive will look like. I'm calling this the one-word intention. So this activity is really good for teens. It's really good for adults. It's good to do with partners. It's a great individual activity. So what you're going to need for this art activity is we're going to get maybe an art journal, maybe just a piece of paper and some pens. That's kind of your basic supplies that you'll need. I'm sure you guys have those around the house. You can also use an old book or an art journal if you have that. But I want you guys to get as creative as you can. So with this, you might find paints around the house. You might find crayons, colored pencils, markers. You can use whatever supplies you currently have, whatever you can get your hands on. But with that piece of paper, with that art journal, or even that old book, I want you to think about, set aside like 5 minutes a day to do this activity. And what we're doing is we're setting a one-word intention for our day. So think about something that you need in that day. Your word might be calm, it might be relaxation, it might be quiet. So whatever you need during that day. Some people, you might want to use a word that you need to release. So your word might be anxiety, or you might need to relieve stress. Your word might be loneliness. So think of that one word, and we want to write that word somewhere, anywhere on the page. Once you write that word on the page, this is where even more of the creativity starts. We are going to surround that word with colors, lines, shapes. There's no wrong way to do this. So as you can see, I just used basic pens. I had a colorful pack of pens and a piece of paper. But like I said, you can get out an old book that you got from Goodwill and use that. You don't have to use blank paper. You can use watercolors, colored pencils, but the goal is to just create a surrounding of this word for just a few minutes. And what we're doing here is day by day, we're actually engaging in a practice where we're checking in with ourselves. We are setting an intention for that day. And if you do this, once a week, once a day, what you end up with is kind of a record of what it's been like to live during a pandemic, what it's like to live during quarantine. This is something you can look back on and you can say, at the beginning of this, I was really lonely, but then I made some progress and now I'm feeling really purposeful and really intentional. And so that's the goal with this, is to really set aside time for us to check in with ourselves and check in with how we're doing. You can do this with your teens at home. You can do this just by yourself, to make intentional time to be mindful. You can do this with a partner to kind of share with each other. So this is a good activity for families, individuals alike. This next activity that I have for you guys, this one is good for families with young children. This one is actually close to my heart because I have a 9-month-old baby at home. And so some of these art directives, I realized like, hey, I can't do this with my kiddo. So I wanted to come up with something that I could do and that families like mine could do with young kids. So this next activity, I'm calling this one Clean Creativity. This is good for families with young kids, good for ages like 0 to 10. The only materials you'll need for this are thick paper, maybe even cardboard. Maybe you don't have thick paper or cardstock, so you can, cut up that box you got from Amazon the other day and just use a piece of that cardboard. You'll need some tape, you'll need like a Ziploc bag, preferably those gallon-sized Ziploc bags, and then you'll just need some paint. So if you don't have that, Michael's does curbside pickup these days, so you'll need either finger paint, acrylic paint, tempera, any kind of paint. The only exception is you won't necessarily want to use watercolor paint on this. So once you have your art supplies, this one has a few steps to it. So the next step, you are going to want to put that piece of paper into a Ziploc bag. That's the first step right there. And then with the color paints that you pick out, just drop a few of those paint colors into your Ziploc bag before you close it. Full disclosure, my Ziploc bags are Avengers themed, so you'll see Iron Man poking his head out there. But once you drop your paint in, you want to kind of close up all the air as much as you can out of that and seal it. And then for most kids, you'll want to tape this down to a surface. So you can see that in the third picture that I taped that down to a high chair tray. And once you tape that down, that's whenever the kids get to enjoy it. They get to kind of check in there. So you'll see my daughter's little chubby fingers. If the kids aren't that interested in it, you might put some little food down. We put puffs down to get her to really engage with the art making. But this is where they get to have fun. We're encouraging them to explore, to really feel that sensory sensation in the paint. And once that's done, you get to, once the paint is spread sufficiently and you feel like it's covered the page as much as it can, then we want to be careful. You can let this kind of sit for a while, but because it's in plastic, it's really not going to dry out. So once it's done, then you can carefully pull it out and pull it out of a Ziploc bag. You can even use scissors to cut the Ziploc bag open if that's easier. And once it's out, you have, for me, this was my kiddo's first art ever. So I have a first creative art piece from her. You can frame this, hang it up. This is a really good activity to just get your kids engaged in sensory play. That's the goal here, is to engage those senses. That's how kids learn. They learn through play and developing their senses. And the plus side is you get like a really no-fail abstract piece of art that, a little representation of where they were at in their first artwork ever. So that's really helpful for young kids and helpful for parents who are looking to not make a mess with art activities. So this next art project that I have for you guys, this is really good for families with older kiddos. With this, I'm calling this one the Treasure Hunt Collage. So with this art project, it's good for ages as young as 7, maybe even a little bit younger. We want to look for different materials like thick paper, cardstock, cardboard even. You'll want some type of glue or Mod Podge. and then you'll want some scissors maybe. And really the only other thing that they need is access to the house, maybe a couple rooms in the house, or access to the outdoors. So you can kind of theme this one, inside or outside treasure hunt collage. And with this, what we're going to do is you're going to send your kids on a treasure hunt. They're going to go inside or outside. You might want to limit what rooms they have access to in the house. They're going to go on a treasure hunt, and we're going to ask them to just collect objects that they find beautiful or objects that catch their eye. So when my family did this, these were some of the things that we found. It was an old music note page, some lace, and then some colorful index cards, some fake flowers that someone gave me for Mother's Day, and a card that was actually sent in the mail. So when you find these different objects, you're going to have your kids, once they're done on their scavenger hunt, on their treasure hunt, they come back with their arms full of treasures or maybe a box full of treasures, and they return to the workspace that you guys have laid out. And once they have enough treasures that they found, that's whenever you're going to have them maybe pour all the treasures out on the kitchen table. If you've got multiple kiddos, they can share treasures. If they're not into sharing, then that's okay. They can separate their treasures and only use what they found. But once they have organized all their treasures that they have, we're going to use those to kind of glue them onto the cardboard or onto the page that you have. So it's really good if they're getting light materials or materials that are two-dimensional. Some three-dimensional objects, as long as they're light, you can use hot glue to attach them and things like that. But you wouldn't want them to bring in their big giant stuffed dog because they think that is beautiful. Those are type things that aren't really going to work for this project. So they're bringing in small, lightweight objects. You can allow them to cut the paper or to tear the sheets that they want, that they think are beautiful. And then they're just compiling that onto one page together to create an object, to create one giant collage image. You can also do this on like a picture frame with three-dimensional objects. You can cover that picture frame in Legos and plastic dinosaurs and little trinkets that they find in their room that have been lost in corners and in the closets. So you can do this on things that aren't just two-dimensional as well. But once they have their collage, that's when they get to start being creative and just spreading all of their images around on the collage and organizing where they want it to go. That's our end result. You can see that part of the card. That little dog is from a card I got in the mail, and kind of in a field of flowers behind like a sunset with some music notes in the air. So this is just a fun art activity, and what it really does here for our kiddos is it encourages exploration of these routine spaces. So a space like your home that they've been in isolation for 2 months now. They're bored, they've seen the space, they've played with all the toys, but what we're asking them to do is look at those spaces with new eyes. Look at those toys, look at those surroundings with new creative eyes, and gather things that draw their attention, gather things that make them feel beautiful. This is a way to increase resilience in our kids, because instead of looking around the same old room, they're actually looking at a space searching for positivity. And that's going to increase their resilience. That's going to help them look at environments and find strengths, find positive, find beauty in even old environments that they've been in for months. So this is a way to help our kids look at our surroundings a little bit differently, which is really helpful. So this last art directive that I have for you guys, possibly my favorite one. This is the art activity to help us really engage in the community. So I'm calling this art activity a nature monument. So with that, this is good for ages 5 and up, maybe even a little younger if they have some parental supervision. But with this monument, with this nature monument, what we're doing is the only thing that your kiddos need is access to nature. So you can do this one in a public park, you can do this in your backyard, you can do this at any point. anywhere as long as they have access to nature. And the goals of this, or the steps, similar to the one we just talked about, is we're going to send our kids on another scavenger hunt. They're going to collect nature objects that they find pretty or beautiful or interesting. You might want to supervise a little bit, otherwise they'll come back with a handful of bugs or maybe some poison ivy. But once we send our kids off to explore, they're coming back, they're maybe creating piles of pretty things. So they could find wildflowers or sticks or just different things that they find interesting. And once they come back with those objects, then the goal is to create a monument out of them, create a symbol. And this can be really simple. You know, I don't want us to get too caught up on the word monument, because what these can look like is very simple. We just want to create something that we can tell was made by human hands. So we're using the nature and we're using the natural elements to create something that's made by humans. And what this does, you can put this in a park, you can put this out in your neighborhood, you could even put it, you know, make a little tribute on the grocery store garbage can for people to see. But these nature monuments, it uses our natural environment to kind of push a nod towards our humanity. It says, you know, hey, we were here. It's kind of like leaving our mark. We're sort of leaving little breadcrumbs, or our Cinderella's glass slipper, if you will. We're leaving it for other people to find. These were things that we found in our backyard, in our garden, maybe even in our bird bath, some of those little stones. And then in combination with flowers and leaves. And what we're doing here is we're really trying to connect. We're leaving something behind, something beautiful that we created, something behind for others to find. We're basically trying to reconnect with our community in a safe way. You know, it's a reminder that I walked this trail and I left a nature monument at the end, so that next time when someone else walks the same trail, they'll remember that even though we have to stay 6 feet apart, even though we feel maybe a little isolated, we're not alone, that someone else was here before us and that we're not alone in this. So this activity, you know, it's a really good intentional way of leaving behind something for others to notice, and for others to appreciate and feel a part of something. This activity is really similar to the movement that happened where you guys probably saw some rocks painted around town. People started this movement where they would paint rocks and leave them in places for other people to find. It's a similar concept, except you don't need a lot of art supplies. So hopefully these 4 directives and art activities are encouraging for you all. I would really encourage parents to model for their kids. That means that you've got to engage in it, be brave and be spontaneous, and engage in the art making with your kiddos. That helps them get really excited about it when you're excited, so that they're not having to carry all of that excitement all on their own. So with this, during this time of isolation, you know, our goal is to bring the family back together, bring each other back together, bring the community back together. I do want to make, you know, a note of, if you guys are noticing anything during this time, pay attention to if any of these art activities bring up any intense emotions for your kids or for yourself. If you're noticing any intense anxiety, like pits in your stomach, even anxiety attacks or panic attacks, if you're noticing any intense emotions, that might be a sign that you want to just seek out some professional services, some art therapy services or counseling. And you can also, if you're interested in art therapy services in your area, you know, Mosaic is in Tallahassee, but there's plenty of services usually in most of our cities around town and around the state. So also notice how your family is doing with as things open up. You know, you might have had kids that really pushed through this quarantine really well, and they're doing great with it, but as the states start to open up and as the cities start to open back up, that might be where you see some behavioral concerns, or that might be where you start to see their anxiety come back. So just noticing that if any of these art directives or if any of the state new changes start to increase emotions or things like that, I would just encourage you guys to be aware and take note of that. I do have some resources for everyone before we finish up today of how to talk with our kiddos about COVID-19. I know that this is a family webinar and we're trying to bring our families together and have some productive conversations. So with that, it's really important for us to talk with kids about what's going on. If you guys have any questions about art therapy, you can always go to the American Art Therapy Association, that's arttherapy.org. If you have questions about art therapy in Tallahassee, you can go to Mosaic Creative Counseling. And the next two links are links to articles for how to talk to our kiddos about what's happening, how to talk about quarantine, how to talk about coronavirus. And that last one is a YouTube link. So that's a really kid-friendly video for everyone to educate our kids with honesty, but also giving them a safe space where they understand that they're safe and that we're keeping them safe. So hopefully these resources are helpful when you guys are doing art with your kiddos and then some questions pop up. Hopefully this is helpful to have those productive conversations and have positive and open communication with your families while we're having fun and while we're engaging with art. So thank you guys so much for having me here and spending time watching this video.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to share some of that with my friends who are trying to find creative ways to engage their children. And it really, art as therapy really does open up your brain in a different way. And it's so important right now that we, especially children and those of us who find ourselves in front of screens all day, as you said, it is super helpful. And those were easy, wonderful ideas. So thank you for sharing that with us. As you know, some of our guests were able to submit questions prior. So we're going to pose those to you now and perhaps get your insight. So I liked what you said at the beginning about enjoying the process of creating art. I think as we get older, sometimes we concentrate way too much on the end product and belabor the point that it's not museum worthy or something like that. So how can you, or what reassurance can you give to those who really don't consider themselves artistic or are hesitant to even begin the creative process?
Yeah, I love this question, and whoever submitted it, I just want to thank them because I get this question all the time. When we don't feel like we're creative, when we don't feel like we don't have any art skills, and how do we just start? How do we engage in it? So the three things that I would recommend to really boost creativity or to encourage us are, one, to look at art. There is nothing wrong with looking at pictures, going to museums, visiting creative spaces, and that gets your creative juices flowing. That gets ideas bouncing off in your head. That's going to really give you an idea of, what do I want to try? What type of media am I drawn to? What type of look am I drawn to? And there is no shame in imitating or copying an art piece. That is something that's really important because all art is just a continuation of someone else's piece. We all have influences that we, I saw this thing and it looked really cool, so I tried it, but mine looked a little different. So there's no shame in seeing something, liking it, and trying to copy that. So creativity is about the courage to create. It's not about having this mysterious quality that we either have or do not have. I am creative or I'm not creative. It's just about the courage to try and the courage to create. So whatever compels you, look at art, get those creative juices flowing. And the second one is give yourself permission both to follow instructions and to go off script. Everybody is different, just like how kiddos play differently. Some kids want to play with horses, some want to play with trains, some want to build blocks. Every kid plays different and every adult creates different. What I like to do in my free time, I love pottery, I love clay, but some people hate the feeling of clay and some people couldn't be further away from it. And so that's completely fine. Give yourself permission to follow instructions, to look up how to do something. And then when you're ready, give yourself permission to go off script, to try something different. Give yourself that leeway either way. And then the last one that I would just add, which we've already talked a little bit about, is just adjusting your expectations. Knowing that process over product is a really good mantra to have. It's okay to just enjoy the artistic journey and sometimes to not like the product. I have plenty of art that I've kind of stored away in corners because I didn't love the product, but I spent weeks working on the process and it was worth it. It was an outlet. And so when we adjust our expectations and really focus on the journey, as the journey's worth it, the journey's enough, just to be creative is enough in and of itself. I don't have to love the product. And sometimes we won't. Sometimes, especially if we're expressing really hard emotions, really maybe some ugly stuff like anxiety. I don't like to feel anxiety. Why would I want to look at art that represents it? But that's okay. The goal is to express it. And so you've already accomplished something just by engaging in the art itself. So I hope those three things, looking at art, look at pictures, give yourself permission to copy and follow instructions or go off script, and then adjust your expectations. Engage in the process instead of focusing on the product. I hope that's helpful.
That is so helpful. Pottery is my go-to. As a new artist, I have to say personally for me, pottery was something I discovered that really calmed my mind. And when I first started it, I ran from the studio the first time I had to go by myself because I was like, there was too much expectation. So I think if those who are listening can really reflect on your words, it helps those who don't consider themselves artistically inclined. So can you recommend any social media accounts that center around art therapy or art in the home? Is there any social media that you recommend?
Yeah, so this question I had to do my homework for. For starters, I would recommend just the American Art Therapy Association. Their website is arttherapy.org. They have a lot of different blogs, different resources, but then there's a few others that I would definitely recommend checking out. I'm going to share my screen one more time so that you guys can see those links instead of me just reading them off. That's the American Art Therapy Association. There's also the Art Therapy Alliance. This is by Gretchen Miller, and she does a really good blog. There's also Psychology Today, the Healing Arts is the blog, and that's by Kathy Malchiotti. Just to get more resources and more information about activities or what art therapy is doing and things like that. And the fourth one on the list, I would really recommend going to that website. It has a list of 50 art therapy blogs. So the top 50 art therapy blogs, these are going to be just chock full of therapeutic art activities. Now I will make a note that art therapy on social media is a little bit edited because a therapeutic art activity is very different than participating in an art therapy session. And so when you're on social media, you'll get at any of these sites, you'll get different ideas, different posts of creative activities or therapeutic art activities, but that's going to be a little bit different than there's no art therapy at home social media accounts because it is like a mental health profession. And then you can also follow Mosaic Creative Counseling. We're posting stuff all the time about different activities and different topics. So hopefully that's helpful for the social media. Yeah.
And we'll have this posted on our website for those who want to share this with others, and certainly have Nicole's information. So Nicole, who inspires you? What artist inspires you? Who are you inspired by to do the work that you do and create?
Yeah, I think this is a really hard question. I really want to have I want to be really cultured and have 7 famous artists that inspire me. But I'd have to say that's not really who I am. I think the artists that inspire me are small town local artists. I love going to craft fairs and just being in creative spaces. visiting like art studios that you pass by on the side of the road. And you're like, let me go to that pottery shop, or let me see that artist on the side of the road. I think those small town local artists, those are the people that are just compelled to make art day in and day out without fame or recognition. And those are the ones that I'm drawn to. I have, like a cabinet full of handmade pottery where I know the potters, or I met them, or I went to school with them. And that's where I feel really inspired, is by the relationship behind the artist. I'm drawn to get that, who is this person, and why are they compelled to make art? They're not necessarily famous, but they're just doing it every day. And I think that's what drew me to be an art therapist instead of just like an artist myself or an art educator, is really that relationship with the artists themselves, or that local feel, instead of just looking at the product or looking at something hanging on a wall and feeling connected to that. I really feel connected to the people behind it. And the people, there's something relatable about that to me, where they're just compelled to make art day in and day out. Doesn't matter if it ever hangs in a museum, they're going to make art. And those are the artists that really inspire me and that I'm drawn to. That's why I'm at every craft fair, or pulling over on the side of the road to visit like a small town pottery studio and stuff like that.
That's awesome. So I have one final question, probably the most difficult. Might be the easiest, I don't know. Is, what is your favorite FSU memory?
I would have to say it's going to be a tie between, I have to say, the football game. The football games are just the excitement that kind of radiates. And then graduation. I'm really feeling all those seniors out there right now. And so seeing all those Facebook posts, and high school seniors and also college. So I really feel for those seniors right now. So I'm feeling very thankful for my own graduation that I got to have. So I think, those two are definitely some of my favorite memories.
Well, that's wonderful. I think having you as a graduate to be inspired by today, I hope they find something that they can work on in this time for them, because I know we all have such warm thoughts for those who missed their commencement this year and hated that as well. So, but those are great memories to hold on to. Well, thank you again, Nicole. We're better, certainly, because of dedicated alumni like you, who are making a difference in your community. I love your relationship aspect of the work that you're doing. And thank you for taking time to share your expertise with us today. To learn more about virtual engagement opportunities through the FSU Museum of Fine Arts, be sure to visit their website at mofa.fsu.edu. You can also view previous webinars on our website. And don't forget, next week, we'll have FSU graduate and meteorologist Marshall Shepard, who's going to give us information on a myriad of topics, and we can't wait to meet with him. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next week. And as always, go Noles.